The Browns are 4-2, but yet a lot of people in a lot of ways feel like this team is the same old, team that would be 1-5 or 2-4 at this point. And a lot of people after the devastating loss to Pittsburgh are asking themselves, is this Browns team even good? Is what we saw for those 4 games a mirage? Well, let's talk about it. Real quick, guys, before I jump into this video, please, again, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and ding that notification bell so you can be notified when I upload. Also, if you could, as noted, I've been having some issues with YouTube as of late, so if you could support me and follow me on Twitch and also consider jumping onto my Patreon or even sending a donation via PayPal, that would be greatly appreciated. But that being said, let's get into the video. And what I want to talk about today is, one, expectations and just how absolutely fast we can get carried away from what the expectation is to the point to where the fall from reality becomes so disorienting that you also don't know where you're at after that crash. Now, to illustrate that, I'm going to show a clip of the past. Now, before I do that, I have to be the first to admit here, I have had some takes that don't age well. Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, Steelers going 6-10 in 2020. There are a couple of takes I have had that have not been very great at all. They've been very bad takes. So I say this to say, I am no genius. I'm just somebody who looks at sports and makes my hypothesis on what I see. And that being said, I think we should listen to what I said in September 1st. So what are my final thoughts as the Browns wrap up the public portion of this training camp? My thoughts are that the big pieces on offense look great. Everything else on offense looks okay, looks fine, not bad. And I think especially early on, within the first month and a half of the season, the more this team is forced to rely on the passing game, the more they will look like they're struggling or sputtering, because that part of this offense, it's just not there yet. It's just not done. It's not going to be done in time. This defense has some rather large holes that are going to be exploited during the season, and it will be frustrating to watch at times. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. I think this team is going to be a little bit frustrating to watch within the first month of the season, especially in September, because let's keep in mind, they got 9 practices, and then they have to play Baltimore and turn around on a short week and play Cincinnati. Their first 2 games happen within 10 days of each other, and they have exactly 9 days of practice to prepare for essentially both games. It's not an optimal situation for a team with a new head coach. But what I will say is that keep in mind the top-end talent has looked really good. And that top-end talent might carry them, might be able to get them a few games. I guess what I'm trying to say at the end of the day is that this 2020 Browns team is a good team. There's no doubt about it in my mind. They've had a good camp. They look like a good football team. But they're also a flawed football team. If you expect this team to blow teams out like Washington and Cincinnati, you're going to be disappointed. If you're expecting this team to look dominant for any consistent stretch of games early in this season, I'd seriously look at lowering your expectations. But if you're expecting a playoff team that can compete for the division, I honestly think this team is one of the better bets in the NFL. Are they a 15-1, 14-2 team, or even 13-3? No. They're more in that 11-5 ceiling to 9-7 team. That's where the Browns are going to lay at this year. That's the type of quality of team they are. They're a good team. They're a flawed team. Now, I want to note, when I said that in September, there was a sizable chunk of people, especially local beat writers, who thought anything above 8-8 was way too optimistic for the team. Remember, 8-8 was like the really popular kind of prediction for this team. So expectations from the local beat writers was 8-8, and a lot of fans also agreed with the 8-8 prediction. Some of them kind of begrudgingly because they didn't want to get carried away with expectations, but also a lot of people legitimately believed this team was 8-8. I even had to go on a little bit of a rant later that week about how I felt like 8-8 was completely unacceptable for this team. So we were at that to start the season. That was the expectation for the entire season. But now we sit here at 4-2 after a stretch of 6 games where most fans in September would have been happy with either 2-4 or 3-3. So one, why is when this team is pretty much what most people predicted it to be actually a little bit better than what most people predicted it to be. That the environment around the team goes from so optimistic to absolute flat disappointment on the level of 2019. Like the stuff I'm hearing from some fans, not all, some fans and a lot of the people in local media, it sounds like 2019 Browns stuff. This team is 4-2. Like I feel like I'm losing my mind at some points. And they're losing their minds, not because something new popped up, right? Like if something we were expecting to be good wasn't good, and that was kind of what got exposed against Pittsburgh. Like let's say that Myles Garrett hadn't been playing great, but Larry Ogunjobi was really carrying the defense all season. And then against Pittsburgh, Larry Ogunjobi had an awful game. Then, okay, yeah, that'd be cause for concern because we were expecting Myles Garrett to do that. Larry Ogunjobi, you weren't. So that seems kind of flukish. But the fact is, everything that's good on this team is exactly what we expected to be good. It's exactly where we said. I even said it'd be up and down, it'd be a little shaky, and it'd be frustrating. This is the frustrating part of the year. The defense is exactly what we thought it was going to be. Holes all over the place, not a great secondary. They're not communicating well. They have not been able to stop a single thing. That's exactly what we thought the defense was going to be. Baker Mayfield, exactly what we thought he was going to be, which is a work in progress, which he is a work in progress now, a injured work in progress, which is a problem that I'm going to notch on Kevin Stefanski for allowing Baker to play well into that second half of the game when he was clearly injured. That doesn't mean I want Kevin Stefanski fired by any exaggeration, so don't pull that from that. I'm just saying that wasn't the best move by Kevin Stefanski. I hope Baker can be healthy for Cincinnati, but if it looks at any means shaky, then you have to sit him to make sure he's healthy, because a healthy Baker, I think, is going to be a key to a successful 2020, because Case Keenum, he ain't built for wintertime Cleveland football outdoors with the elements. You saw how different that ball looked out of Case Keenum's are. And that on top of this offense really needing you to be able to attack downfield, Odell Beckham being on the team, yeah, that ain't something Case Keenum gonna do. If the Browns played in a dome, I might be able to hear those arguments a little bit better, but this ain't built for Case Keenum. Also, we said the pass rush was going to be relying on Myles Garrett. It has been relying on Myles Garrett, less so than we thought coming into the season, but definitely reliant on Myles Garrett. And we said, hey, the Browns have 3 stars: Kareem Hunt, Nick Chubb, and Odell Beckham. And Nick Chubb's out. Kareem Hunt's been injured. Odell couldn't get the ball against Pittsburgh because Baker was getting sacked like 6 times. So nothing we discovered in Pittsburgh in week 6 after that shocking blowout, because that was a little bit shocking. Nobody expected the Browns to get blown out like that. But everything we discovered after that game, none of that was a surprise. And that's the good thing, right? Like, you don't want to discover a surprise. You don't want to have been relying on a player that might not be good. Like, that's not the thing. Say what you want about Baker Mayfield. Nobody was relying on Baker Mayfield. This offense was never relying on Baker Mayfield to be their first option. He's always the second option. If they can't run the ball, okay, then we'll go to Baker. We knew that was the case coming into the season. That's not a surprise. But yet, somehow, we are shocked to the core when we actually see it. And look, I think everybody got carried away with expectations so far this season. Your team wins 4 games in a row, you're going to get carried away with expectations. You're going to start thinking Super Bowl when we were just thinking playoffs, maybe a win. And I think that fall from that expectation back to where the Browns actually are kind of disoriented people into thinking this team's not good at all, that this is going to be a 6-10 team, that this is going to be one of the worst teams in the NFL again, that this is going to be a dysfunctional situation. I know it can be hard to have perspective after building yourself up so high after 4 straight wins, but perspective is incredibly important, because you don't want to make bad decisions for or against because you lacked perspective. And to further illustrate this point, I want to talk about the 4-win teams at the end of 6 games in 2019. And I think this is an important point to bring out. Buffalo was 4-1. They made the playoffs. They were a pretty good team last year. Baltimore, 4-2. They were a really good team last year. They obviously made the playoffs. They were eventually the number 1 seed in all of the AFC. They lost in the first round to Tennessee. Houston was 4-2. They made the playoffs. Historic loss in the playoffs, but nonetheless made the playoffs. Minnesota, 4-2, made the playoffs. Kevin Stefanski came from that staff. New Orleans, 4-2, made the playoffs. All those 4-2 teams made the playoffs. Now, there is one 4-2 team that did not make the playoffs, and that is the Carolina Panthers. And the reason the Case Keenum stuff being pushed so hard bugs me, despite this team being 4-2 at this point, because it feels like some parts of Browns media and Browns fans are trying to will themselves in to the same exact position that caused Carolina to completely crumble after starting 4-2. Why did they crumble and start with 4-2? Because Cam Newton got hurt within the first 2 weeks. Cam Newton's their number 1 overall draft pick, supremely talented, but he has had some issues in the last few years staying healthy, and also on the field, he just hasn't looked great. They did not want to go with him. And Kyle Allen stepped in there and won 4 games, went 4-2, and they decided to go all in with Kyle Allen, the guy who was the obvious backup, the guy who was the undrafted free agent, the guy who had the obvious physical limitations, the extreme physical limitations on the football field that one Cam Newton did not possess. Cam Newton went on to not play for the rest of the year, and it seemed like the moment that everything got handed to Kyle Allen completely crumbled. Because Kyle Allen is not supposed to have the keys, because Kyle Allen is not talented enough to hold the keys of that castle. Kyle Allen is somebody who got beat out by Dwayne Haskins, who was one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL for 4 weeks, stepped in replacement for Dwayne Haskins, and then got benched for Alex Smith, who almost died 2 years ago on the football field. So that's how bad Kyle Allen has been. And that's what people are trying to do right now with Case Keenum. Don't dislike Baker and focus on Baker's flaws so much that you blind yourself into believing that Case Keenum is a better option. Please don't do that. Look, and I'm not trying to blow up Baker and make him seem like this great player. Baker is not a great quarterback right now by any means. He couldn't be great. He seemed like he was on his way to being great before he played injured, but it ain't always been there. Sometimes he don't even look good, but most of the times he's a C+ quarterback to a B- guy. Like, that's what Baker has been through the first 5 weeks of the season. In Pittsburgh, he was a D- guy, but you can also say he was injured and got sacked a lot. Now, that perspective being said, understand this is not coming from somebody who thinks Baker Mayfield is like the second coming of Brett Favre. But like Case Keenum, is he really going to solve the problems that Baker Mayfield has, or is he going to make the problems worse because he's essentially Baker Mayfield without the one thing that does make Baker Mayfield an above average quarterback, which is his arm talent, arm strength, and occasional accuracy? Like, that's what you're sacrificing. Everything good that Baker gives you, plus everything that you get because of Baker's limitations, the lack of height, the lack of ability to find passing lanes, all that's there with Case Keenum. It doesn't go away. You're not going to unlock Odell Beckham because Case Keenum's out here throwing him 5-yard slants. It's not going to work. But yet, there are people who are pushing for this. And I just want everybody to take a deep breath and understand that the Browns are 4-2. They're a good football team. They're going to have ups and downs. They're going to be frustrating. And they're most certainly a flawed team with a flawed quarterback. But hey, they're going to be fine. They're going to be a good team this year. They're going to contend for the wild card. These are things we knew before the season. These are things we know during the season, and now are supported by a record of 4-2. They beat a good Indianapolis team. They have not shown up in Pittsburgh and Baltimore. Let's see how they show up in week 15 and 17 before we cement their fate completely. But this team does need to get better. They have a lot of room to grow, but they're also not a team that should be thinking about tanking for Trevor. And I also trust that the coach and GMs aren't dysfunctional. Eventually, you're going to get back a healthy Nick Chubb. You're going to get this offensive line completely healthy with Wyatt Teller. You're going to get guys back on defense. In the secondary, maybe Greedy Williams comes back, and that extra depth makes a difference. The secondary is going to get more time together to be able to shore up some of these communication errors. And maybe, just maybe, when it comes week 15 and 17, this team has a better showing against some of those top-tier teams. But right now, they're a flawed team. They're a team that could be 9-7. They could be 11-5. Let's see how they develop over the last part of this season. I understand the pain that game had against Pittsburgh, especially since it happened in Heinz Field, where I've even said Brown seasons always go to die in Heinz Field. I understand that pain, and I understand the fear that that's going to spiral into like this record losing streak, which is going to have the Browns finish 6-10 again. I understand it. Browns fans have been hurt so much they don't want to be hurt again. I get it. But right now, we don't need to focus on the worst what-if scenarios that are possible. We just need to focus on what's ahead for this Browns team, which is Week 7, a game against the Bengals. And much like how Week 1 just disappeared from our collective consciousnesses so fast after they beat the Bengals, Week 6 can disappear just as fast if the Browns get a good win here on the road against Cincinnati and continue to develop and grow as the season goes on. That's what they need to do. And that is why the Bengals game, again, is a must-win for the exact same reasons it was a must-win in Week 2. So that's my thoughts on where some Browns fans are at. I think a lot of Browns fans are just ready to move on to the next week and play next week's game, but there are some Browns fans that are having a hard time kind of coping with the loss at Heinz Field, and I understand that. That's my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. But again, guys, thank you for watching. Have a great day. Have a good night.